So, I've been on this journey using AI as a kind of cognitive mirror. The goal isn't to have it think for me, but to see how I think. And wow, recently that mirror showed me a pattern that just completely blew up the story I was telling myself. Let's get into what I found. It all started right here, with these two numbers from my AI chat log, 127 to 31. Just let that ratio sink in for a second, because when I first saw it, that gap, it felt like a punch to the gut. It was the start of an investigation into a decision I didn't even realize I'd already made. And this, right here, is the core of it. I was telling myself, and, anyone who'd listen, that I was weighing two different projects, Project A and Project B, totally equally. I was being neutral, thoughtful, keeping all my options open. But my behavior, tracked perfectly in my prompt history, showed a 4-to-1 commitment. The data, it just doesn't care about your story. It is brutal. Yeah, that brutal math, 127 prompts for Project A and just 31 for Project B, it was just impossible to look away from. It was what kicked off this whole exploration. I had to understand why there was this giant canyon between the narrative in my head and the cold, hard evidence of what I was actually doing. The really wild thing was the feeling that came with this. I realized that all the energy I was putting into performing open-mindedness, it was a total waste. I was putting on this whole show for myself, this theater of careful consideration, while my actual behavior, my attention, had already cast its vote, quietly, in the background. The decision was being made one tiny unconscious action at a time. So, obviously, I needed a better framework. I had to find some way to make sense of the hidden logic, the reason why our actions so often betray our words. And that search led me straight to a really powerful idea from the world of economics. It's a concept called revealed preference. An economist named Paul Samuelson came up with it way back in 1938. And the idea is actually pretty simple, but it is profound. If you really want to know what someone values, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Their actual choices, where they spend their money, their time, their focus, that's what reveals their two priorities. And this is the best way I've found to think about it. Your stated preference, what you say you want, that's like your personal PR department. It's great at crafting a public story, managing your image, but your revealed preference, what you actually do, well, that's the board of directors. They're the ones making the real final decisions behind closed doors, often without the PR team even being in the loop. And look, this isn't just a clever metaphor. There is solid data on this. Studies on what's called the say-do gap show that watching what people actually do is about 1.5 times better at predicting what they'll do in the future than just taking their word for it. Our actions are just a much more reliable signal than our words. So, and this is crucial, it's not that we're necessarily lying. A lot of the time, we're just fooling ourselves. And this clicks right into place with what we talked about in episode 25, confabulation. We suffer from this introspection illusion. We think we have this crystal clear view into our own motives, but a lot of the time we're just making up plausible stories to explain our behavior after the fact. My story was, I'm being neutral. My behavior told a completely different one. Okay, so once I had this framework, my AI chat log totally transformed. It wasn't just a log anymore. It was an itemized receipt of my attention. Every single prompt was a transaction, showing me, in black and white, exactly where I was investing my most precious resource, my focus. And when I audited that receipt, the pattern was so much deeper than just the number of prompts. It showed up across 3 different dimensions. For Project A, the time and energy allocation was super high. The quality of my questions was deep, it was iterative, and the frequency, totally spontaneous. I just kept coming back to it. For Project B, well, it was the total opposite. Low energy, surface-level questions, and my check-ins felt scheduled like a chore. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a typical prompt for Project A, the one my behavior had already chosen. See how it's deep? It's about refining something. It's focused on implementation. This is the kind of question you ask when you're already building something in your head. Now, compare that to a typical prompt for Project B. Feel the difference? It's a surface-level validation-seeking question. This is what you ask when you're still trying to talk yourself into an idea, not when you're already in the trenches doing the work. And so, we come all the way back to the brutal math. But now, it has a whole new weight. 127 to 31, it wasn't just evidence of a decision. I realized the ratio is the decision. The huge difference in attention, in depth, in energy, that imbalance was the choice. My behavior had already closed the case. while my conscious mind was still pretending to be the judge. This realization completely flipped the script for me. The big question wasn't which project should I choose anymore. The real question became, what's the hidden cost of putting on this whole theater of neutrality when a choice has so obviously been made? And the costs, they are very real. First, you just burn an insane amount of energy trying to maintain the act, the pretense of being undecided. Second, all that wasted time and effort just delays any real progress on the path you've already chosen anyway. And third, and this is a tricky one, you can even use a tool like AI to create a confabulation loop, asking it for balanced pros and cons just to confirm your own false narrative of neutrality. But here's the upside. This is the opportunity. The second you finally acknowledge the commitment your behavior has been screaming about, you get to stop the performance. You can take all that energy you were wasting on the theater of indecision and plow it directly into building the thing you were already building all along. Which brings us to right now. I need to be super clear here. This is a documentation of a process, not some kind of self-help guide. I'm exploring this problem while I'm stuck right in the middle of it. And simply being aware of the pattern, well, that hasn't been enough to solve the new problem it created. So here's the big lesson for me in all of this. The objective data from my behavior, the chat log, it's just a way more reliable guide than the subjective story I tell myself. This hooks right back into proximity bias from episode 24. How you allocate your attention is how you make your decisions, and my attention has definitely chosen. And so this is the new question. It's the only one that matters now. The conflict isn't about which path to take. The data already answered that. The conflict is now completely internal. It's about acceptance. Am I going to consciously admit to the commitment my behavior has been making for weeks? So, in the spirit of just documenting where I'm at, here's the current unresolved state of things. What's still true is that, I'm still performing neutrality a bit. What awareness hasn't fixed is this deep-seated reluctance to just go all in on the commitment the data is showing me. And what I see now, with painful clarity, is that maintaining this illusion, it's just exhausting. And I have to end here because it's the honest truth. Even after all this, I literally caught myself yesterday coming up with brand new justifications for why I really need to do more research on Project B. So the pattern is documented, it's been identified, but it has absolutely not been solved. The work goes on.